Hey, Nicole Huntsman here. I've got your weekly forecast for December 13th through December 19th. As a recap for last week, let's just look at a few things that did happen last week that we talked about in the forecast. So we did have Monday, we had ISIS. Apparently somebody had released their full document that sort of goes over their plans for world domination, more or less. And I did mention that there would be some sort of spy activity on Monday, perhaps. Also, we had, of course, Obama. He had to address the nation on several different topics. We had, of course, the foreign conflict with the U.S.-led coalition in Syria. We've had domestic issues with our weather, with flooding. We've had, obviously, issues with gun control. We've had some storms. We've had tornadoes this week, a lot of fires this week. So, you know, the flooding and the fires and just this crazy weather. I mentioned in another video, I did title last week, lightning crashes, and I was thinking about it as a metaphor, but it actually ended up applying literally this last week. So also ISIS, I believe their finance minister was killed by some strikes from the US-led coalition. And I did mention that their sources of income or their virility relative to their financial situation would be attacked. That would be what the U.S. coalitions would focus on. We saw that this week. Also, I did talk about there being some retaliation against Muslims, perhaps at mosques, and we did also see some protests outside of mosques. And looking at my notes here, also. What else do we have? A lot of paranoia this week. A lot of packages that were being, suspicious packages being reported. And so, of course, this past week we had Donald Trump with his pronouncement that Muslims should be prevented from re-entry to the United States or entering the United States, which was a highly reactionary comment and definitely brought out some very polarized reactions in people and citizens of the United States. Now, with this, of course, there were some people he did actually have some public assassination threats, whether they were, ones that would actually be carried out or not is a different story. But I did mention last week that on Thursday there was going to be some sort of threat made to the Capitol, whether it was Washington, D.C. itself, or the administration, the president, or the administration, or the government in general, because these are all sort of ruled by the 10th House. Now, what I didn't consider was a presidential candidate. So, of course, we had Donald Trump sort of in the fray last week, and I think that's what I was seeing in the chart. But now, on to this week. So we've got some changes this week. A really important change is our Mercury. So Mercury this week has moved into Capricorn. If you were to look at these slower moving planets, Saturn on out, and in particular Saturn and Jupiter, because they're very important right now. That Saturn in Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter, and of course we've got Jupiter in Virgo. Now, because Virgo is ruled by Mercury, that makes our Mercury very important. It tells us a lot about both how Saturn and Jupiter are sort of playing out on the world stage. So Mercury in Capricorn is very different from Mercury in Sagittarius. Mercury in Sagittarius is all about sort of the big idea, the vision, the big pictures. There's a lot of talking. There's a lot of this happening, but not a lot of action necessarily followed up or following up or backing up the conversation. When Mercury moves into Capricorn, Capricorn is an earth sign, of course. In fact, Capricorn I think of as sort of the most earthy in a sense, in that they are about the three-dimensional world. They're about taking an idea, which you've got with Sagittarius, an expansive idea, and then consolidating that idea down to a workable plan. So when Mercury moves into Capricorn, we get a little bit more practical, a little more level-headed, a little more serious, and about sort of what are we going to do. So you see the government passing new laws, creating restrictions, creating kind of blockages, preventing things, to prevent things from happening. Because most of our planets this week, like the majority, not all of them, I have a little list here, not all of them, but if you were to do kind of a breakdown of the 10, the 10 major planets, most of them have some sort of they had their final dispositor in Capricorn, okay? That Mercury in Capricorn. So even our moons this week, we've got 4 moons, and 3 of them, their final dispositors it's not technically a final dispositor because Mercury in Capricorn is, Mercury is not Capricorn's ruling planet. But if you then go from Capricorn to Saturn and Sagittarius, you start like a loop. So Mercury in Capricorn is where we end. This is really symbolic too, because Mercury in Capricorn is like the ground. It's like the okay, now it's time to get down to brass tacks. What are we going to do about the things that have been happening in the on the world stage? So, okay, Capricorn. Also, I want you to think of Capricorn as these are our governments. Capricorn is an important, really important zodiac sign relative to our national chart, relative to NATO's national chart, relative to a lot of the big players that are part of NATO, relative to like Saudi Arabia has a Capricorn stellium in their national chart. So it's authority, it's rules, it's governing, it's, the body of leaders that are there to say, this is the right thing to do, this is the wrong thing to do, and it's those rules that keep everything sort of organized and it's what keeps all of our government running smoothly, because there's sort of correlation, everybody's on the same page, okay? So Mercury in Capricorn is helpful because we just came out of a period of time where we had everything sort of ending up with that Mercury in Sagittarius as sort of the kind of the not the final dispositor, but that sort of was what was flavoring and informing everything over the past few weeks or whatnot. So Mercury in Capricorn. Okay, this is, like I said, this is all about being precise. This is about the facts. This is completely ruled by Saturn. Now, Saturn is separated from emotion. Saturn is about the cold, hard facts, okay? This is going to be helpful because it will help sort of cool down some of the hot-headed, over-the-top thinking, sort of the bombastic thinking that we've had this past, especially this past few weeks, this past month or so. But also, Mercury in Capricorn is a little dictatorial, and it wants to take charge. It wants to tell you what you're supposed to do with your life. And when you give that power to governments, it can get a little authoritarian and a little, like I said, dictatorial. Dictatorial. You know what I'm saying. Okay, so now also with this forecast, I'm not going to do Sunday. So in the future, I'll go Monday through Sunday. Okay, so overall this week in my personal notes, some of the things that I made note of, because we've got that Capricorn Mercury influence until about January 3rd, so it's like, the rest of December, this Mercury in Capricorn at this week will make a conjunction with Pluto at 14 degrees. This conjunction will oppose our United States Cancer Sun by about a degree orb or so. This adds an intensity of focus. And remember, Mercury's conversation, and it's this conversation that's in Capricorn, which is about planning. It's practical. It's like, let's talk about all this paranoia that we've been experiencing, these packages that have been reported that were nothing, or pranks, or people calling and saying, oh, someone's got a gun, but they didn't have anything. Or I just heard about a kid that had an axe on a college campus and was shot by the police, So it's this kind of over-the-top, reactionary, paranoid, deluded thinking that we've been experiencing. It's still going to be present because we still have some things with Jupiter and with Saturn that are, you got Sagittarius in the mix, and it kind of sort of expands things, it amplifies things a little bit. So, but it will be better this week. This is, to me, the only thing that I'm worried about is I'm worried about it going too far to the in the other direction, where we are trying to make all these rules and limiting and restricting people's freedoms in order to help them feel safe and secure. So these will be issues this week. Let's see. Also, we've got Saudi Arabia. Like I said, they have not been super active. At least, they haven't been in the media much lately relative to the conflict in Syria and with ISIS. This will be a time where they're activated more because you've got Mercury in Capricorn, you've got the moon moving through Capricorn at the beginning of the week. So we will probably see Saudi Arabia be, kind of called into, not called into question, but, there will be, it'll be in the news. We'll hear about Saudi Arabia probably taking some action of some kind, or at least being called upon for support of the U.S.-led coalition. Now, let's see. Also, we've got, Syria. So there may be, as far as relative to Saudi Arabia, there may be a request for them to make some adjustments in their trade with Syria, or there's a suggestion that perhaps they'll be asked for air support with the U.S.-led coalition. And also, this would be a good time for negotiations relative to the oil trade. So we'll see, maybe with OPEC, maybe hearing more about that this week. Also important to note this week, 3 of the 4 moons, as well as Mars, Saturn, Uranus, Pluto, they're all being sort of sobered and restrained by these serious conversations from that Mercury Capricorn, and also planning. This is a great time at the end of the year. It's a great time to look back at the year. It's a very Capricorn thing to do. Look back at the year, and then with that Saturn and Sagittarius, look to the future and plan for the future. What did we learn from last year that wasn't working? What can we do differently moving forward? So you personally in your life, this is a great week to sit down with a piece of paper and kind of go through your year in review, look at what you accomplished, what you didn't accomplish, and make an actual plan. What can you do differently this next year to be more successful? And maybe just focus on picking a few simple, small, short-term goals and kind of calendar out your next year. So let's see. Oh, also relative to Christmas, Capricorn is conservative. It's about conservatism. So I would not be surprised if this holiday sales this week weren't as great as they had been in the weeks previous. When we had that Mercury in Sagittarius, Mercury rules trade, and Sagittarius is like, abundance. So that would have been people buying things more than maybe they could afford, they needed. And, of course, we had people that some record gun sales, which makes sense when you consider that the Mars, Pluto, Uranus T-square that we have had. But also this week, that T-square is now moving out of orb, and so it's separating. So, and then there's a sobering effect. So people are going to be a little bit more, this year probably conservative with how many gifts they give, and they're going to be giving more practical gifts. So that's just a little side note. Might be kind of fun to see if we hear about that in the news this week. So also, with Capricorn, and it's Mercury in Capricorn, there is a rigidity to communication and the thought processes, and the emotional climate as well. It sort of makes everything a little bit colder, a little slower to move. So that's why I'm saying there could be a little bit of a cooling down as far as rebellious actions are concerned, and more of a focus on this return to sanity and security. And people. It will temper, it's going to temper people's, like I said, the insanity and the sort of reactive emotional thinking that people have had in the last couple of weeks. So that's helpful. Issues with trade, sales, talks, and rules being created. These will all be things that we will hear about this week. Okay, now Jupiter in Virgo is the dispositor of the Sun, our Sun in Sagittarius. Of course, it's not a final dispositor because Virgo is not ruled by Jupiter. They're doing a little loopy dance with each other because we've got our Jupiter in Virgo. Virgo is ruled by Mercury. Our Mercury is in Capricorn. Capricorn is ruled by Saturn. And that's our Saturn is in Sagittarius, okay? So there is they're doing a dance in a sense with each other. This Sagittarius, Virgo, Jupiter, Saturn thing is happening, okay? So these are the themes we're working with. We're working with Sagittarius, like I said, abundance, expansion, the possibilities of what could be. That's why it's philosophy and ideology and religion. It's giving meaning to life, okay? Virgo is about delineating and naming things and describing things, organizing and categorizing things. Virgo likes to self-sacrifice. Virgo likes to do things on behalf of other people, but it's out of duty and obligation. So I'm thinking we are going to see some of these themes this week with that Capricorn, earthy Capricorn supporting that Virgo more. We will see more of these themes of self-sacrifice. And my only concern is, of course, there could be issues of self-sacrifice relative to suicide bombing and that kind of thing. I don't think that that's going to stop this week necessarily, but there is more of a tempering sort of happening to that previous Sagittarius Jupiter kind of over the top, overly optimistic. We saw this with Donald Trump with his the things he was saying, because Jupiter's been applying to his sun, and so and his moon. He's got a T-square Jupiter, sun, and his moon, and so it's like and Jupiter's in his first house, so it's like the public are seeing him and viewing him in a way that's positive, and it's just expanding his ego. So it's kind of at this place now where he thinks he can kind of do or say whatever he wants. He will come out unscathed, which has been the case because he's this whole time since this for most of the summer, or rather towards the end of the summer till now, he's had Jupiter like in his first house. So the public has been on his side. It's been a kind of a lucky, fortuitous placement for him, especially because it's applying to his sun and his moon. But it's going to be moving into his second house, so things will be changing a little bit for him. Not necessarily for the worse. I actually haven't studied it in depth yet enough to be able to tell you, but I'll do that on another video. But this week, I would not be surprised. We'll talk about this in a moment. We wouldn't be surprised if we hear from him relative to the comments that he made last week. And I'll go into detail about that in just a moment. But let's see. As far as, so this era of hysteria is going to go from talking about the issues and about the people, blaming people, to actually doing things to take action this week. We're going to see lawmakers, hopefully, could actually be more grassroots people actually taking action. You can see also protests this week, and then we'll talk about that a little bit later. But also there's a little bit of an enhanced slip into fantasy and delusion on Thursday and Friday. So it's a great time actually to release a movie that's about a war between good and evil. And it's actually a fantastic time to release a movie about, rebels and an empire that are fighting one another, which is what we have happening on the 18th on Friday. So when we have the release of Star Wars, and we will talk about that in a moment as well. I'll give you guys a little review about what I think the reaction will be to Star Wars, okay, relative to the cosmic weather. And then finally, we've got transiting Jupiter as it's going to be conjunct the national Neptune exactly this week. So I think it's at 22 degrees. This is a great week for escapism. It's a great week for also people, really, it can go one of two ways. You can either be sort of deluded in your thinking. It can enhance sort of that thinking in our nation. And we're also going to see people relative to religion and again, ideology, philosophy, meaning. What does it mean to be an American? What's the religion of America? These will all be talked about this week. And because of some of the other formations happening, it's going to be quite a polarized conversation. So let's get on to our forecast. We'll start out with Monday, December 14th. All right, Monday, December 14th. So on our world stage with world politics, we will probably see, and even not necessarily in politics, the religious sort of world arena, religious leaders asking for support. What's interesting, I have a feeling that this week the Catholic Church will speak, and in particular on Monday, will speak about their finances. And will probably, I heard that relatively recently, the Pope decided that he was going to make the finances of the Catholic Church open to the public, which I think is fantastic. And I believe that on Monday we will hear some more about that. Now, tax issues, resources, tax issues relative to religions and their non-for-profit status and the fact that they're tax exempt. We may hear about these issues as well this week. So on Monday, we've got our Sun in Sagittarius, of course, it's 21 degrees. Sun and Jupiter square is forming. This is government leadership fighting advisors on how to restrain hysteria, or at least there's a little bit of conflict here. And perhaps how to direct the fight against terror. Border issues will come into focus for sure, especially here in the United States. We'll be hearing more about border issues on Monday, and probably travel issues, just everything with passports, travel, borders, foreign entry, that type of thing. We'll hear about on Monday even more. I know we've been hearing about it, but we'll hear about it more. Moon is in Capricorn. It moves into Aquarius on Monday. Aquarius, traditionally was ruled by Saturn, and I like Saturn for Aquarius. Aquarius, I think, is kind of a misunderstood sign. I appreciate that Uranus rules. There's a bit of an unpredictability and a craziness to Uranus, and I do think that you can apply that to the Aquarian personality type. I do believe they have an eccentricity, but there's a Saturnian quality to Aquarius, and that is Saturn is what rules Capricorn, which of course our Mercury is in Capricorn. The Capricorn version of Saturn is a little different than the Aquarian version of Saturn. To me, the Aquarian version is it's a bit skeptical. It's quite logical. It likes to ask questions, and it likes to question things. Okay, it likes to question authority. It likes to question why things are done the way they're being done. With it being the moon, it's also an air sign, so this will give a little bit more of a logical. It's going to cool down the sort of emotional reactivity that people have been experiencing the past couple of weeks. It's also sort of like okay. This past week there were a lot of false positives. Is that how you say it? False positives relative to bombs or gun threats or terrorist threats here in the United States, like domestic threats. And if you follow the news, I follow the news. I have an app on my phone, so I get all these updates. There were a lot of them this last week, and for no cause. They were just people being afraid and paranoid, and a lot of taxpayer money being wasted. This will be Monday. It's kind of a time where people are calming down. Okay, they're calming down and they're getting a little more detached from the situation. So that's helpful. As well, we've got our Capricorn moon at the beginning, of the day. It will be trining Virgo, the Virgo North Node. The North Node in Virgo, to me, it's retrograde right now. This symbolizes, there are different takes on what the North and the South Node represent in sort of, as far as forecasting goes. To me, it symbolizes poles, not the literal poles of our Earth, but sort of two sides to an issue, okay? And in Virgo, it's quite analytical. And of course, you've got Virgo and Pisces. Virgo to me is earthy. Pisces is very spiritual. Virgo is kind of the practical, and Pisces is well, let's do it this way. Virgo's form, and Pisces is the formless, okay? So it's a little bit about what's the reality of the situation versus what's the imagined reality of the situation, okay? So the moon, having that Capricorn moon trine this, that to me kind of cools that down a little bit, makes us a little more down to earth and practical, realistic. So I think there will be some talks about not calling the authorities unless you're sure that what you're experiencing is really a threat, perhaps. Okay, Aquarius moon then is void, of course, for the rest of the day. It's kind of like it's not making aspects, to any other planets. And so that, like I was just saying, that Aquarius vibe does it kind of removes the emotional reactivity just being in Aquarius. But then the fact that the moon's not aspecting anything, it sort of removes that emotional call to do something, that call to take part in a reactive way. So that will be helpful. Now, Mercury in Capricorn. So the Mercury in Capricorn, it's going to be sextile to Venus in Scorpio and this Neptune in Pisces. It makes a little, nice little sextile, a little triangle, okay? The, if let me say this correctly, so the, our Venus in Scorpio and that Pisces Neptune, of course, they're trining each other, okay? So like, and then you've got the little Mercury moving into position to make a little triangle. It's like a little sextile triangle, okay? It's like a little minor formation, but it's telling us that this is what I was talking about when I was talking about the Catholic Church. It's religious leaders asking for support, money, resources, or tax issues relative to religions. And again, this is where the Catholic Church perhaps being a little more transparent and actually coming out and making some sort of a statement about their books, or them sort of giving an outline about how they're going to release information, that kind of thing. We'll hear about that. And also taxes relative to religious institutions. I wouldn't be surprised if we heard about that Monday or Tuesday. Now, also communication this week. Communication, they're probably going to take on a spiritual tone this week. Capricorn Mercury likes this exactness and like concrete details and fixing what's broken, repairing what has been spoiled. Again, he wants to get everything reorganized. Like it's a mess, it's a jumble, and both Virgo and Capricorn like to organize things. Virgo really likes to see what the problem is, and like there's a tangle, and Virgo likes to take everything, all the pieces out and lay them flat, down on the table, and then Capricorn likes to take those pieces and say, okay, this is what we got. I just inventoried it. We're going to do this, 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 and this with all of these pieces, okay? So these two really work well together, and with that Capricorn moon in particular, that's there earlier, on Monday. I wish it was there later in the week because that would help us to emotionally kind of activate everything to continue making some concrete plans to fix what's been happening. But in your life, if you're someone who has strong cardinal signs in your chart, and in particular, this, the Mercury just moved into Capricorn. So our Capricorn Mercury is going to be floating between, it starts at 5 degrees of Capricorn, and then it moves on up to about 16 degrees, okay? So if you have a cardinal sign for a sun sign or moon sign, or even a Mercury yourself or your rising sign, you're going to notice this Capricorn Mercury. It's a really great time to get to sit down. It's like a good time to like pay your bills, I mean, it's not like the only time we can pay our bills is when Mercury's in Capricorn. I'm just using that as a metaphor. It's a good time to sit down and do the work that you maybe aren't wanting to do. An example personally for myself, speak for myself, my Mercury is in Virgo. So it likes this Mercury in Capricorn. That's why last night I stayed up for, 3 hours or so, just looking at 2016, just diving into it. And I was able to focus, and it was really enjoyable working hard with my mind and going quite epistemic with it rather than diversive, which is what I usually like to do, but going really deep and drilling down on something. That's Capricorn Mercury, and it wants the details. It wants the facts, I should say. Okay, Virgo likes the details. Okay, so they work well together. So that's going to be in effect. As well, our Venus is in Scorpio. So Venus in Scorpio, remember, Venus has values, and when you look at sort of as far as how it plays out on the global scale, it is what is currently being valued by humanity, okay? What we are finding, whether it's what we're receiving pleasure from, or whether it's what we are sort of focused, what we're seeing as something of worth. Now, it's in Scorpio. Okay, Scorpio is traditionally ruled by Mars, right? So, and its modern ruler's Pluto. These are both the planets that have to do with conflict and war and burning something down so something new can come forth. It's not surprising, actually, that we've had all of these fires this past week because, of course, we've had the Mars-Pluto-Uranus T-square, but also this Venus in Scorpio is also quite, it's like destroying something like the phoenix, burning it down to ash so that then the new phoenix can rise up out of the ash. So these sorts of themes are going to be some things that we continue to see this week. And with our Neptune in Pisces, that trines this Venus. It makes a nice flow between sort of what we're valuing and the Neptune part of us, which is sort of the formless. As far as the collective unconscious goes, it's like the collective unconscious. So it's good in a sense, but anytime you get Scorpio, that means something's gonna have to die for something new to come forth. So to me, having these two connected, it's like our collective delusions or our collective blind spot is really kind of being accentuated by a love of power, perhaps on the shadow side, and those people who are in positions and seats of authority taking advantage a little bit of their ability to manipulate and control the collective unconscious, okay? So, people manipulating people's fears. So people in power manipulating citizens' fears. So just be aware do your best this week to be aware of if you're feeling paranoid or delusional about what's happening. I mean, you're probably perfectly safe. Go to that Mercury in Capricorn, which just says, look at the statistics. How about that? How about you look at the statistics? Let's talk about how many people are actually killed in random acts of violence, especially here in the United States. And so these will be topics we'll be hearing in the news, I'm sure. This sort of call to come back to our logic and calm down, stop being so reactive, etc. Now, Mars and Libra, we've got the Mars and Libra as it's been there for a bit. Mars and Libra, again, just like Venus is not totally comfortable in Scorpio, especially with Scorpio's traditional ruler being Mars, which is, Venus rules Libra, Mars rules Aries. They're opposite one another. So same thing. So Mars is in Libra. It's in the sign that's opposite. It's natural, the natural zodiac sign it likes to be in. So it's not a super strong Mars in a sense. It's kind of having to figure things out. And the way I've been reading it is it's this desire to take action as part of a coalition or as part of a collaboration with others. Okay, and we've seen this on our national stage. We've had a U.S.-led coalition fighting over in Syria, mainly airborne, and just as Mars moved into Libra, we've started taking more of an active role with the airstrikes over there. So that to me shows it's an example of how Mars and Libra would sort of play out. Now, the Mars opposite Uranus square Pluto, that T-square, it's separating. The final dispositor to all three of these planets, I shouldn't call it the final dispositor, but just the dispositor of all three of these planets is that Mercury in Capricorn. So that to me does give a sobering effect. And remember, Capricorn's like big institutions and big organizations. It's them moving and taking action, them planning, them sort of making things happen. Mercury is very much about movement. And so when you put this is informing this T-square now. Before it was Sagittarius. When you have Sagittarius informing this really highly unpredictable T-square, it's much more explosive. It's much more, unpredictable. It's more dangerous, really, because it's like gasoline, and you have a matchbook sitting right next to it. It's very like, that's why we had all these fires, and we had tornadoes, and we had all these storms, and we had, plus with Neptune things that are happening. It was a week of a lot of volatile events. Volatile words as well, that were incendiary. The things that Donald Trump said obviously were very incendiary and lit people on fire, made people really angry. It's Mars. So now with it being informed, with these three planets, this formation being informed by Capricorn, again, there is a cooling down and there is a sense of sort of coming into control and getting back in charge of our reactive state of being, okay? And it's also the government. The government and larger organizations, they are definitely supported by this type of energy, okay, in the heavenly bodies. It suggests that we will start seeing them, again, whether it's in laws being passed, whether it is just rhetoric that we're hearing that's about control, the government taking more of an authoritarian role in our lives. You could hear some Big Brother stuff this week, like, stay out of my personal life, big government. These kinds of things will be talked about this week, but it's all relative to like our safety and security. It's like, how do we sort of control this instability we've been experiencing? But it's like they're late on the scene because it's all separating. So it's like, okay, great, thanks guys, yeah, way to get here after the events have passed. So also with that, because it's separating, it's cleanup as well. You're going to see cleanup from floods. You're going to see cleanup from the storms and fires, etc. Obviously, I mean, duh. We don't need Mercury and Capricorn for that to happen. But it will be in the news. It's just, one kind of follows the other. So makes sense. Okay, we could also see a call from legislators here in the United States. Capricorn's opposite our sun. And Mercury is communication, it's words, it's talking. So we're going to hear calls from this sort of Capricorn place of conservatism. Things aren't being done right, to the sun. The sun is the administration, it's the president, it's also just the country itself. So there are calls across the aisle, so to speak, like to come up with a plan. We need a plan, a concrete plan. We need to know, like, what's your 4-point plan to happiness? That's you, Sandy Hancock. 4-point plan to like solving this issue of Syrian refugees, this issue of ISIS, this issue of our borders being, vulnerable. Okay, so these will be. We'll hear more of the same, I suppose. Now, as far as ISIS goes, they are regrouping. There's some things happening in their chart where they're going to be regrouping. Definitely we'll hear about the success of the ISIS raids. We'll hear about a little bit more of a count, like who they've been able to target and kill, as well as the targets that they've been able to actually acquire or destroy. And to me, it looks like militarily we've been very powerful and successful. We've had a lot of aspects showing our strength and our virility. Yes, we will be hearing now from the Capricorn side. I'm going to give you an inventory of what we've done. We'll be hearing about this probably on Monday or again on Tuesday. So also Mars quincunx. Mars makes a quincunx to Chiron. So remember, Mars is activation and it's gets you to do something. It shows you where there's busyness and there's people doing things. It can also be anger, but it makes a quincunx to Chiron. So Chiron's the wound, and Mars can even be like the knife. It's something that causes a wound. All right. Again, that's our post. It could be our post-storm cleanup, but I think also there's going to be more talk about refugees and more talk about how to fix this. Come together, because it's Mars and Libra. How to sort of come together to help these people that are. Stranded they're homeless. The problem that we have is that Chiron of ours, we've got it being informed by, of course, it's in Pisces. And so Pisces is ruled by Neptune and by Jupiter traditionally, which brings us back to our Saturn and Sagittarius, which brings us back to that sort of us, them in a sense. It's this rhetoric about like thinking the correct answer to the solution, but it's can be a little bit one-sided, like your version of what the correct solution might work for you, but it's not necessarily going to be working for everybody. It's a little bit self-righteous. So yeah, we'll hear more of that this week. Overall, that is our Monday. All right, Tuesday, December 15th. I'm titling this one, Repair to What Has Been Spoiled, which is like the I Ching hexagram. I believe it's 18. I could be wrong, but I think that it's 18. And so, okay, obviously this past couple of weeks, we've had some events, I'm speaking relative to the United States. We've had some events that have been really volatile, whether they have been natural disasters, whether they have been a conversation that we've been having relative to politics. The overall climate has been reactionary. And of course, we've had the tragic event that happened in California, along with other shootings. So these discussions of violence, these discussions of unexpected acts of violence that are senseless, and then also Neptunian sort of not being in reality, this delusional sort of thinking combined with having a dream of how things should be, but how they really are. It's made for this melting pot of crazy. Okay, so this week in particular, we have on Tuesday this Sun and Jupiter square. And because we've got this overall climate of hubris, this overall climate of I know best is going to be somewhat corrected this during this whole week, but in particular on Tuesday. And what's really interesting, we are going to see with Donald Trump, we're going to see him make a relatively moderate, somewhat sort of humble statement. I'm guessing it's going to be Tuesday. I actually have to apologize. I didn't go back and look for sure on his chart relative to this issue, but I think it was Tuesday. But he'll say something, he'll make some sort of a statement about how he was misunderstood. It's not going to be that he misspoke necessarily, but more like he was misunderstood. The public loves him. He loves America. He's here, on behalf of Americans. He's saying the things that no one else will say, blah, blah, blah. He's just going to, and so because this is, the funny thing is he's going to come out of this relatively unscathed. He's going to have a few things happen with his finances, like his Venus and stuff, take a few little interesting hits. But as far as the public opinion of him, it's going to be enhanced by this statement that he makes, okay? Now, I'll tell you what's transiting. So we've got the transiting Jupiter, as I said, is in his first house, which is that house of it's you. And Jupiter is benefic. It brings opportunities. It brings just fortuitousness to that part of your chart. So that's kind of luck. It's giving him luck where he's getting out of these things unscathed, relatively unscathed. And then we've got, of course, it's creating this T-square with his 10th house Sun. Okay, that's his Gemini Sun in the 10th house, which is his ego. And then his Sun is opposite his Saturn, which is down in, I believe, in his 4th house, if I remember correctly. I think it's it's in his 4th house. His moon did I say Saturn? His moon in Sagittarius down in his 4th house. So that's his idealistic, authentic, he does shoot from the hip. It's a little bit too spontaneous at times, I suppose. So his moon down in the 4th house, our transiting Sagittarius will conjoin that moon of his. So you see, the moon is, that's his emotional, it's his inner world. The Sun is lighting it up, so he's going to feel justified. The Sun is just the world. It's also the world kind of supporting his inner stance in a sense with that Jupiter in there. So it's kind of like everything just kind of lines up where he's going to feel pressure, like he needs to say something, but it's going to come from a place of defending himself and also well, this is why I did it, and not necessarily apologizing. But for whatever reason, there's a suggestion that the public will be okay with his response, especially the moon in Aquarius, which will, that's going to make a nice trine to his Sun, and it's going to make a sextile to his moon with the Sun in that mix. So saying it's like the moon, transiting moon is the public opinion. So at least in the United States, the public opinion is not going to be necessarily damaged at all by this. People actually, that moon in Aquarius too is kind of a little bit of a moon that's oh, I can appreciate that you're speaking honestly, you're speaking your version of the truth, and so people will, he's going to get away, he's going to get off scotch-free or however you say it. Okay, this day moon is in Aquarius. Of course, this is feeling skeptical about humanity's sanity a little bit with everything else that's happening. That moon is going to square Venus. This is a time we could have some possible suicide bombings or stories of self-sacrifice. There's an element of self-sacrifice on behalf of Islamophobic behavior from people here in the United States. There could be some stories of someone who self-sacrifices their own reputation or something to protect protect Muslims, who are the majority of them, who are just good people, good, normal people, good, bad, ugly, just human. I think we'll hear a story while that moon is in Aquarius about someone or a group sort of standing up for these people who are being maligned unfairly. Also, that moon in Aquarius will then make a trine to our Mars in Libra later in that day. So it's these are calls for equality coming together. Let's hear your story. Let's hear your story about how you're just a normal person. So we'll hear some stories about Americans who are Muslim, who are just everyday people, part of the collective. We are an Aquarius moon country, so it's sort of speaking to that part of us. This is a country founded on, we're a place of the melting pot. People have come here from all different religious backgrounds, and we need to have that freedom to practice or not practice the religion of our choice, because that's a founding principle that this country was built upon. And to get rid of that, that's when you start moving down that road of, we don't want to be following a demagogue of some kind. The demagogues, they want to strike fear into the hearts of the citizens so that they then have power to do what it is that they want to do. You remove people's freedom. Now on to our Mercury and Capricorn, of course. Remember, this is thinking with prudence. It can be overcalculation. This is listening to advisors because it is making aspects to, or will be making aspects to Jupiter. It is also helpful limitations, speaking modestly about self-sacrifice for the greater good. These will be themes that we see, on Tuesday and really for most of this week. Capricorn Mercury, it is sextile Neptune and Pisces. Remember that Neptune and Pisces is a little bit floaty and a little removed from reality. And the Venus Scorpio, it's not exact, but it's like a connection between words. Capricorn, those words that are those words of let's talk about the reality of the situation, and war and religion, and also nature is also very Piscean, and destruction. So it's like, to me, this is going to be, we'll be talking about planning and rebuilding. Like, how are we rebuilding? What's the plan here? So we may hear things relative, again, rebuilding after these floods, or what the damage report actually was, and hearing about also in these foreign countries, religion. How are we going to heal this wound? Okay, so this formation, this is not an exact formation, but it does suggest there will be some words about war relative to religion, like a religious war, and talking about the destruction side of it and what's necessary and how to do it in a way that's more surgical, how to do it in a way that is, Scorpio Venus can be exposing things that are hidden, corruptions, and so to me, it could be a time where we're talking about keeping things like, okay, so this is not a transparent time, is what I'm trying to say, okay? Capricorn doesn't really concern himself with transparency. Capricorn's about getting a job done. And Capricorn's also very much military. It's authority figures, okay? So issues of spying on, whether it's even just citizens here in the United States, collecting data from them to be used in this war against, terror, or it's almost also there may be an issue of Muslim, like mosques or people who are of the Muslim faith being targeted by information gathering, like what the CIA, that kind of thing, or just discussions that if things went down that road, that becomes a little scary, because then you're moving into Cold War, that sort of Cold War mentality. It's fueled by fear and not necessarily based on the reality of a true threat to our nation. So that will come up on Tuesday, possibly also Wednesday. With this Mars in Libra, it is going to be moving into position to oppose our national Chiron, which is in Aries. And Aries, Aries is the pioneer. Like, that's the United States. That's our initial wound as a country. The reason we're here is this is a country of immigrants, other than obviously Native Americans, As far as the Europeans that came over and then the following people from other nations that came here to the United States, we all came here because we were moving from a place of pain to get to a place of opportunity. That's Aries. Aries is the warrior striking it out on their own, trying something independent of help from anyone else. But this is also kind of our wound. Yes, we're a melting pot, but that diversity also makes us have differences. Having Mars and Libra opposing that says to me, we will be discussing how do we come together? How do we fix this? How do we heal this wound? It also, though, Mars is a knife. Mars is a gun. Mars can be painful to Chiron. So it could be like opening up the wound again, scratching it open in a way that is not necessarily helpful, okay? Not cathartic, but just aggravates the wound. So you're going to see both, because we're so polarized right now. You're going to see both. You're going to see the wound being aggravated. So you're going to see protests perhaps this week. We're going to see mosques continuing to be targeted, more Islamophobic reactions. These types of things will continue to be happening this week. And that's overall kind of my take on Tuesday. Okay, so sort of a rebuilding, how to repair what has been spoiled day. Wednesday, December 16th, this day to me is sort of a day of public protest. I think that's going to be something that we're hearing a lot, whether it's physically protesting something in person with signs and the whole shebang, or it is online, just sort of whether it's petitions going around, people sort of calling other people to action. Okay, Sun is in Sagittarius, of course, 24 degrees. The Sun is going to be quincunxing the United States Mercury, which is in Cancer, and it's in the 8th house in the national chart. I use the Sibley chart. eighth house is an intense, it's highly focused. This is Scorpio. Scorpio has to do with, you've got options, you've got 5 options, and it's taking that one option and that's the options, like separating it, culling it, separating it out from the herd and focusing on that, okay? That's where our Mercury's in Cancer, which Cancer is a water sign, it has to do with security. It's also, about the homeland, and it has to do with protecting that, okay? So it's sort of the Scorpio part, separating that out, focusing on it intensely, and the conversation that revolves around that, with the sun making a quincunx to it. A quincunx is an aspect that's kind of an uncomfortable aspect. It means it's almost like there's no resolution. So it just activates that part. So there's going to be a lot of discussion about protecting home, family, children, homeland, borders, our nation, and it's going to be heated and it's going to be reactive, and there'll be demands for government action. And this is, as I said, Sun in Sagittarius is a little bit like overly optimistic with its solutions to the problem. It's overly confident in the idea that my answers are correct and this is what we need to do. It's so simple. It kind of can oversimplify things too. Okay. That moon in Aquarius, again, there is that skepticism still that will still be present about the mental sanity of the United States, but it's also a call for freedom and this desire for protecting our individual rights to our freedoms. So we will hear more about religious freedoms, and also there will be talk about the overreactivity. Okay, this is kind of continuing from what we've seen on Monday. All right, it continues through Wednesday. Also on this day, the Aquarius moon moves into position to conjunct the national moon, which is in the 3rd house, which is public conversation. So you see this combination of activation of the nation's Mercury and also the moon. So the sun is activating the nation's Mercury, and the moon, the other very important, obviously, luminary, is moving into the 3rd house, which is the nation's house of communication. It's also trade. It's also transportation. It's also airplanes. Okay. This is discussion about protecting these things, discussion about, Aquarius is about protecting the freedoms, the freedom to speak. It's all of our rights that we have. The 3rd house as well, it's funny, like the word arms, that's very Gemini. The right to bear arms even will be definitely discussed. And also the freedom from arms. Okay, so we're going to see both things being discussed here. The Chiron in Aries, like I said, is being activated. That's that American wound of sort of the displaced and the immigrant, and that quincunxes the national Neptune, which is currently like exactly conjunct Jupiter. So it's really expanded that national, the idea of the dream. And people are a little bit foggy and forgetting the fact that this is a country that was founded by immigrants. It's kind of like, well, we're here now, so that's all that matters. And so it doesn't count for the rest of you. This is no longer the melting pot, And I got my religion, and my religion is works, but yours doesn't. So, so it's this us-them thing happening. There's this wound, and there's this delusion about ideology, or there's this idea that your ideology is the right one, and so therefore no one else gets to have everyone else needs to do what you're doing. Okay, does that make sense? Okay. It's funny, you would think that with this Mercury and Capricorn, it's supposed to help me with my communication. It helps me with studying, but not so much with speaking, which is hilarious. But it's like I can't get the words out of my mouth. Okay, so again, it's a day for public protest. We will hear of some sort of protest happening that relative to the issues of freedom of religion and also the freedom to and the rights to bear arms and just anything that's constitutional, things that have to do with our sort of founding principles and returning to those founding principles, and people disagreeing about what those founding principles are, and people also suggesting that we need to look to the future and that those founding principles need to be tweaked and changed. You're going to hear about that too, right? Okay, on to Thursday. Thursday, December 17th. I'm titling this day Unstable Thinking Alert because we've got our moon. It's just moved from Capricorn and Aquarius, which are relatively, the Saturnian sort of logical placement for the moon. We're moving it into Pisces, which is the least based in reality. So the emotional climate is going to be about the formless. And on the high side, that can be spiritual. On the high side, that can be God, divinity, remembering that we're all part of the oneness. On the low side, that can be delusion. That can be being totally out of reality, or it could be escaping through fantasy. It's actually a great time, which on Friday the 18th, we'll be releasing Star Wars, but it's a great time to release movies. Neptune rules movies because it's illusion, okay? Movie is just you're watching light. It's not even a real thing, right? So, but with this, let's talk about the transiting Jupiter. So it's in Virgo. It's conjunct our national Neptune, which is in Virgo, also in the national, in the ninth house, that house of philosophy, religion. So that Neptune is ruled by Virgo, which is ruled by Mercury. And in our nation's chart, Mercury is in Cancer. I believe 24 degrees of Cancer, okay? So that transiting Jupiter is also trining Mercury, the conversations. So you see, we're going to be having a lot of conversations, but you throw that Pisces moon in the mix, and it's conversations about religion for sure, but it's these issues and these themes of, like I said, not having an answer, okay? You've got people who are of a particular religion who are being targeted by some as being the cause, or perhaps if we sort these people out and we separate them out, cull them from the herd and separate them out, then everything's going to be okay, okay? That is faulty logic, because it's not about necessarily the religion, it's about humanity. Good people and bad people exist, obviously, of all stripes. Let's go ahead and look at the shootings that have taken place in the United States. Let's look at the violent crimes that have been enacted upon citizens of the United States. And I'm sure we're going to see plenty of people who are not of Muslim background, and I would dare argue the majority, I haven't looked at the stats, but this is just me guessing, the majority, I'm sure, are not Muslim. So these sort of this thinking that's based in the formless, it's based in like what I just did, just pulling it out of what you think the reality of the situation is, right? If I'm wrong, sorry, I strike this from the record, but it's just this unstable, deluded ideological thinking. It's based on your own biases, not necessarily on the facts, and it's looking at just one side of the cube instead of spinning it and looking at all the different sides and all the angles and all the facts, all the stats. It's making decisions that are based on data that is just not necessarily even based on data. It's decisions being based on just how someone feels about something, okay? Saudi Arabia will probably most likely be in the news on this day. And in particular, let's see, for Thursday, there's not much else I really want to go into on Thursday other than the things I've already said earlier in the week will continue sort of happening. This call for, let's get a little more practical, let's get a little more realistic. What are we going to be doing to protect Americans, but also to be protecting the ideals, the ideology, to protect our freedoms as Americans, those fundamental foundational rights that we have as citizens of this wonderful country. And returning to, there are a lot of people who take issue with the United States, activities abroad, the military activities that the United States has taken part in, especially since World War II, post-World War II. There are a lot of people in other countries that don't agree with decisions that the United States has made to be sort of the global babysitter in a sense. And there are some who are fine with it, but this is going to be about getting back to what is our role philosophically, what is our role in the as far as the global family goes, the other nations. What is our role? What's our job? And aren't we supposed to be a bastion of freedom? And isn't one of the most basic fundamental freedoms that we have the freedom to believe religiously whatever you want to believe, or like I said, not believe? That's something that needs to be fiercely protected and defended from I'm editorializing now, but in my opinion, you take that away from people, that's when things become scary. Okay, that's when you've got a real problem, because you're removing someone's right to believe existentially what it is they want to believe about life. And that to me is very, very dangerous and wrong. Okay, now let's move on to Friday, shall we? We'll do our Star Wars forecast. It's gonna be fun. Okay, so Friday's next, and Friday, December 18th, we have an exciting day for those of us who are Star Wars fans or science fiction fans in general, right? We've got the release of Star Wars: The Force Awakens. So I thought I would do a little astrology, kind of do a little prediction about how this movie will be received by the American public, just by looking at what's happening relative to our national chart. Okay, so it's like our collective consciousness. First of all, very on the high side, or on the side, the category that would be on the pros for Star Wars, Moon is in Pisces. So Moon is just wrapping up its little tour through Pisces for the month. It moves into Aries at 6 p.m. Pisces is fantasy. Pisces is dreams and illusion. It rules movies. So people will definitely be very excited, and they'll be thinking about what they think the movie's going to be about. We'll then move into Aries. This is our zodiac sign of the soldier, the warrior, which, that works. We are watching a movie that has to do with the fight between the archetypes of good and evil, basically, right? So what we have with Star Wars, we have a movie that has to do with it's a very existential movie. We've got a thing called the Force, that is this collective mechanism of some kind that can be used for either good or evil, which take for that what you will. And then, of course, we have our nefarious and malefic characters like our Darth Vaders and other past movies, and then we have lords and empire, what do you call them? The guys that are in charge of the empire, those guys, the bad guys. And of course, you have like the resistance, and you have these rebels. And so it's this idea of the oppressive authority, the authoritarian figures, but they also represent the father, or the dictatorial father, and then the citizens who want their freedom. And these also sort of represent just the inside of each of us, our individual desire for freedom here on earth, freedom from authority figures. I don't want to be in charge of us. Okay, so anyway, if you look at what's happening with the transits, to me, the resistance, they symbolize or not symbolize, but they're represented by the transiting Mars, Pluto, Uranus T-square, which is separating right now, which means it's weak, it's weakening, okay? Now, this is going to sound weird, but this is how I'm guessing what's going to happen. The Empire would be sort of our Venus and Scorpio. It's a love of war and control. It's the love of revenge. And you have at the beginning of, let me see on that trailer, what does he say exactly? I know the Kylo Ren guy, he says something like, I think I wrote it down. What did he say? Oh, I will finish what you started. So it's revenge at all costs, and it's to the death. So it's like either he's going to finish what was started or he will die in the process. That's very Scorpio, okay? It's Venus and Scorpio. And our Venus and Scorpio right now is quite powerful. It's making it's making Uranus, which is in Aries, it's making a quincunx to that right now. So it's like unexpected too. I think something's going to happen relative to Kylo Ren. I think he's going to be somebody that we'll find out who he is. He'll be revealed. And I mean, obviously, just watch the trailers. Like you can figure out who's missing and maybe guess who it might be. Like father, like son. So, but it will be, but I think that people will want more of a shock or surprise. They'll be kind of like, well, yeah, okay, and what else, And so I think people are going to walk away feeling a little disillusioned, a little bit like it wasn't quite as exciting as what they'd hoped it was. And even I think we're going to hear some people saying that it was a little bit boring even, and that the resistance, it just didn't kind of gel, okay? Like the resistance, the way it was cast perhaps, or just the way the storyline went, that they didn't buy it, okay? I think that on the high side, people will like the overall feel of the movie aesthetically. I think it's going to, just from looking at the trailers even, you can see it feels like sort of Return of the Jedi, or it feels like, one of the older, more original movies. So we shall see. But in my mind, I think people will be pretty polarized. People that love Star Wars, you just love it. But I think those who are willing to critique it, those are the critiques we'll hear. They'll hear that it was not that the surprise wasn't as exciting as they thought it was, or it was, the movie itself was kind of boring or it lacked cohesiveness. All right, Saturday, we've got our Sun in Sagittarius, of course, still. Moon is in Aries. The moon will be ramping up to make a trine to the sun, but that will be happening on Sunday. Meanwhile, that sun that's in Sagittarius, it does square the North Node. These are these themes that have to do with self-sacrifice, because, of course, this is Virgo, North Node, and religion, which is that South Node is in Pisces. So religious devotion, we also might see some issues with women's issues in the church, or gender issues relative to the church. We could see some issues that have to do with ideologies and what boundaries should churches be allowed to sort of step over? What control should churches be able to have on the self-sacrifice that people, or the devotion that people apply to their religious lives? We might sort of see these themes. The moon in Aries then does it. There's a moon-Venus quincunx. That moon in Aries is quincunxing, so it's an uncomfortable sort of in conjunct with the Venus and Scorpio. These are both Scorpio and Aries both have to do with battle, war, fight. So there's a bit of abrasiveness here. The moon also makes a square to Mercury. So this is also conversations, fighting, arguing, disagreeing. It can be kind of a little bit of a heated day relative to, especially in particular with religion. Religious topics, or like my way or the highway. It's just kind of a day for arguments. So especially if you're a cardinal sign person, you might just feel a little emotionally agitated. If your moon is in a cardinal sign, you may feel a little bit like you want to, like you need to either get in a fight or you just probably it's going to come out through words. Okay, your thought processes and the things that you say with your mouth. It can give a little bit of just agitation there. Okay, then finally we've got Sunday, December 20th. On this day, as I do these forecasts, as the days go by, of course, each day is a little bit shorter because we've sort of gone over the things from the, already for the week earlier. So by the time we get to Sunday, it's this is a little short blurb. Moon is in Aries. The moon is conjunct Uranus, okay? This Uranus it was in that T-square with Mars. It's separating now, but that does, the Aries moon is opposite the Libra Mars. And the moon itself, while it's conjoined to Uranus, isn't exactly opposite Mars, but in its sort of path, it's going to kind of hit one, hit the other. So to me, when we're looking at this Mars and Libra, that is that desire to sort of come together, to collaborate with someone else, okay? When you throw moon in there and you throw Uranus, it's kind of, I feel like it's what I need is more important than what you want. So I think these issues of what I need, more important than what you want. If I need to feel safe, it's more important than the fact that you want to carry a gun. So I don't want you carrying a gun on you in public. If I need to feel like this country is safe from people from outside this country, then that's more important than the fact that you don't have a home to live in and you're fleeing a country that's burning to the ground. Like it's more important that I feel safe here in my spot. Okay. So these issues are going to come up. Again, this is what's happening this week. All right. But look in your own life as well. Moon conjunct Uranus gives a craziness. It does give a volatility. So because the moon's so quickly moving, it's not going to be there all day, but it will be approaching, and then it's going to be separating it. So it's going to be making aspect to that Uranus. So there will be the general vibe in the air, a little bit of a craziness, a little bit of a restlessness energetically or rather emotionally, okay? Mercury's in Capricorn, of course, and it's conjunct Pluto at 14 degrees. It conjoins Pluto at 14 degrees. It's in a loose grand cross with that Mars and Libra, and also with the Uranus in Aries, and then throw in the United States Sun, which is in Cancer. Those of us in the United States, this country will be experiencing a lot of conversation, and it's going to be heated debate. And even though it's a Sunday, it's going to be taking place. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw this, lots of talks about immigration, border control, gun control, police brutality. So you see these themes of the authority figures and how they directly affect our right to move about, our personal rights to freedom, okay? Immigration, who should be allowed into this country of freedom? This is a country of religious freedoms. This is a country with a right to bear arms. We have the right to vote or to not vote. All of these issues we're free to move about as we please. You put this Mercury in Capricorn and it wants to get a little bit more, it's a little more controlling. Okay. It wants to talk about sort of controlling that movement, that freedom of movement, especially when you throw it in with Pluto and Uranus and, the sun of the United States. So these discussions are going to be heated on Sunday and really all of this weekend. I mean, as soon as from Friday through Sunday, as soon as that moon moves into Aries, it becomes more heated because it's squaring the Mercury in Capricorn. So it's like people really just being reactive and saying what they think spontaneously without thinking first, kind of that's going to be what's happening. Also, people feeling really protective and then moving into Mercury and talking about we need all these rules in place to protect us. That's also how this could play out. Venus and Scorpio. This is Venus and Uranus are making a quincunx. So this could be violence in the United States, but it's more discussion in my mind than it actually happening. So it's discussions of violence in the media. I bet that will happen, as well as we might hear about the science behind the violence. Like, why is it that behaviorally, what's causing people to react so violently in this country on a sort of a relatively recent. Oh my gosh, frequent basis. Sorry, my brain. And then the discussion of like good guys and bad guys. Star Wars lightsabers. We'll hear about this. Like, hey, you got lightsabers in Star Wars. You've got the good guys have lightsabers and the bad guys have lightsabers. Having a lightsaber is not what causes the problem. It's the human beings. It's the underlying psychology that causes the problem. Okay, you can take the lightsabers away, people can still get them. So let's not be naive. It's just like prohibition. You know, you take something away. I'm sure it will reduce crimes, but you just create a whole other. You take it away here, you create a whole shadow world over here where people get guns illegally. You know, so to me, you just freedom is always. It's always better to move in the direction of freedom and fix the psychology underneath it. All right. Have a good one. Thanks for watching. Bye.